My name is Noelia. I'm 35 years old, living and working in Minneapolis as a financial analyst. Last year on Thanksgiving Day, I received a text from my mother. A snowstorm is coming, dinner is canceled, everyone's staying home to be safe. Love you. I believed her. I sat alone in my apartment eating a cold dinner thinking everyone else was lonely too. Until I saw a live stream on Facebook. My entire family, every single one of them, enjoying a fancy dinner at my younger brother's mansion. No one mentioned me. Not a single apology. Not even an empty chair. I had been silently erased. Have you ever been quietly written out of someone's life? By your own family? If you've ever felt like the extra person in the very family you were born into, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because right after this I'll tell you the full truth about the inheritance they stole and the price they paid for treating me like I was nothing. I still remember that feeling so vividly, that quiet ache of being present but invisible under the roof you grew up in. I wasn't outright hated or yelled at or hit. But in every family photo I was the one standing off to the side, out of the light, slightly blurry. My mother, Darlene, was always charming and graceful to neighbors and friends, but when it came to her 3 children she had very clear lines. Zachary, the youngest son, was the pride of the family, called the heir, ever since he was little, even though he never liked school. Brooke, my younger sister by 6 years, was always the little angel. A single smile or pout was all it took for everyone to forgive her, no matter what she did wrong. Me. I was Noelia. The oldest daughter who followed the rules, never caused trouble, got good grades, but lacked soul. I loved books. I could sit in a library for hours without getting bored. I didn't know how to tell jokes at family dinners, and I didn't dance to the music they blasted every holiday. I often got comments like, "You're too serious, why can't you loosen up like Brooke? What man wants a woman who talks finance all day?" Whenever I came home, I was usually the one in the kitchen with Mom helping her cook. But when it was time to retell the story, it became, Zach helped carry everything in, or Brooke set the table. I didn't get angry, just hurt. I kept telling myself that's just how families are, that maybe they just didn't realize. There was one time I still can't think about without a tightness in my chest. It was my grandmother's 80th birthday. I had just finished a major project at work and got praise from my director for saving over $200,000 in the quarterly budget. I bought a round-trip ticket to Chicago for the party. But a few days before the trip, my mom called, "Noelia, Grandma's feeling weak, so the family decided to cancel the party. Just stay and rest, I'll call you tomorrow." I believed her. I canceled my flight, ordered a small birthday cake to be delivered to their house. 3 days later, I stumbled across new photos on Brooke's Instagram. A vibrant picnic in a large park near Lake Michigan. A red plaid tablecloth stretched across a long table. Everyone wearing matching t-shirts with Grandma's face printed on them. The caption read, "Happy birthday to the most wonderful woman. Thank you for being the heart of our family." I zoomed in on each face. Mom, Dad, Zachary, Brooke, both uncles, Aunt Kara, and Grandma. Sitting proudly in the center, holding flowers, smiling with pure joy. No mention of me. Not one empty seat. Not one apology afterward. I didn't cry. But after I closed the screen, I sat still for a long time. That night, I wrote Grandma a long letter I never sent. I told her I always thought of her when I tried to do the right thing. That I wanted to be there, but maybe I just wasn't part of those special moments anymore. I used to send money home every month, told Mom she could use it for anything around the house. I never asked where it went. I thought if I just played the role of the good eldest daughter, that would be enough. When Brooke got into an exchange program in Italy, Mom called saying they were a bit short on funds. I wired $4,000 immediately. I never told anyone. I thought, if it gives my sister a chance, what's a little sacrifice? I was wrong. Silent sacrifices mean nothing if they don't fit the image your family wants to protect. I remember Mom once said during a family dinner, "Noelia is practical, but Brooke is the one who makes me feel young again." I smiled. But something in my chest tightened. Over time, I learned to stand behind everything. Never ask for anything. Never complain. I thought if I just kept doing my part, one day they'd look back and see that I mattered too. But the praise, the thanks, the priority always went to Zach and Brooke. I became the afterthought, the one no one needs to tell because she probably won't show up anyway, the one whose absence doesn't really change anything. That's how it was for 15 years. Until that Thanksgiving. Until I saw them toasting together while not one person remembered I was still here, still breathing. And for the first time I felt like there was no reason left to keep pretending. I didn't want to be the good girl anymore. Because clearly in this family being good just made you invisible. The next morning I was making coffee when my phone rang. It was my mother's custom ringtone. A soft, calming sound that used to comfort me as a child. But now it pressed heavily on my chest. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Her voice was warm, almost too sweet. "Hey sweetheart. Hope you had a peaceful holiday. We all missed you." I gripped the mug tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Really?" Because last night Zach live-streamed the entire dinner. Everyone was there. Except me. There was a half-second of silence on the other end, then a nervous chuckle. "Oh, that. It was kind of a last-minute thing, honey. Nobody had solid plans. Besides, you know how you tend to make gatherings a bit uncomfortable." I set the mug down. "What do you mean?" "Well, you usually sit so quietly and it changes the mood. People just want a light, happy evening." I closed my eyes. Her voice stayed steady, like she was talking about the weather. I couldn't tell anymore what was sincere and what was rehearsed. "So you chose to lie? Made up a snowstorm that didn't exist?" While everyone was gathered around the table, "What did you think when you sent that text telling me to stay safe at home?" She sighed. "Noelia, you're blowing this out of proportion. I just wanted to avoid any tension. Everyone needed a peaceful night, and you?" "What?" I cut her off. "I don't belong there. I'm not fun enough. Not agreeable enough to sit at the same table." "You always interpret things negatively," she said, her tone sharpening. "That's exactly why." "Exactly why what?" I snapped. "Why I wasn't invited. Why I'm cut out of every celebration. Why I don't even exist unless you need something." "You're insulting your family," she said quickly. "I don't have time to argue about one little dinner. If you want to keep a relationship, you need to learn to be more flexible." I let out a dry laugh. "I've been flexible my entire life, Mom." "Well, fine then," she replied, her voice now cold. "Call me when you're ready to have a civil conversation." She hung up. No apology. No hint of regret. Just the same old narrative, that I was the problem. I stared at the screen. For years, I had swallowed bitter truths with a quiet smile, convincing myself that if I endured long enough, they'd love me the way I deserved. But kindness, when unseen, turns invisible. And silence in the wrong hands gets mistaken for agreement. I opened an old message from Aunt Cara, one of the few relatives not swept up in the family's polished illusion. It had been sent months earlier, after yet another family gathering where no one noticed whether I came or left. "Sweetheart, I know you feel like a stranger in your own family. But there are things you deserve to know. Call me when you're ready." At the time I wasn't ready. I thought I could hold on a little longer. But now it's different. Now I need the truth. And I don't want to face it alone anymore. That afternoon I sat at a small cafe on the corner of Riverside, the place where Aunt Cara used to work before she retired. Outside, the sky was heavy and gray, the wind tapping against the thin window glass. But inside it was warm and strangely quiet. I ordered a cup of black tea. Aunt Cara arrived a few minutes later, wrapped in a moss-colored coat, her face carrying a worry she hadn't yet managed to hide. "Noelia," she said as she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, "I'm so glad you called." I nodded, pressing my lips together, unsure where to begin. She sat across from me, pulled off her gloves, and retrieved a thick envelope from her purse. Her movements were slow, but her eyes were sharper than I remembered. "Do you remember your grandfather?" she asked, her voice low and gentle, though there was something weighted underneath. "Of course I do. I remember the summer I was in 7th grade, he taught me to play chess the whole season. He said, 'You're the only one who'll sit still and listen.'" I smiled softly, then felt a sudden sting in my nose. She nodded, her eyes slightly red. "He loved you more than anyone else, Noelia. And he set something aside for you. Something you should have known about a long time ago." She slid the envelope across the table to me. I stared at it, then opened it. Inside were stacks of papers. Bank statements, legal documents, transfer records. On top was a letter from a law office that read, "Personal Trust Fund established by Mr. John H. Green in 2005, Designated beneficiary, Noelia Green. I looked up. My throat was dry. This is for me? I asked, barely above a whisper. Yes, Aunt Kara nodded. Almost $400,000. He wanted to make sure you could go to school, live independently, and never have to depend on anyone. He wrote in his will very clearly, for the only grandchild who works hard and never asks for anything. But after he passed, control of the trust went to your parents, and everything changed. I flipped through the pages. Regular withdrawals. Large transfers to Zachary's business. Other sums wired to a private university in Florence, where Brooke spent 2 years studying Italian culinary arts. You didn't know about any of this? I asked, my voice cracking. I only found out while still working at the bank. I saw the transfers coming from that trust, but I wasn't authorized to interfere. Everything was under your parents' names. But how they used it, that wasn't right, Noelia. Not right at all. I sat silently for a long time. In my mind, scenes from the past played like a reel. Nights I stayed up until 2 a.m. writing thesis papers after late shifts at the supermarket. Months of eating instant noodles just to make tuition payments on time. Years after graduation, pushing through to repay student loans. Every time I sent money home, I told myself I was the most successful person in the family, even if no one said it out loud. I looked at her. Why are you telling me this now? She bowed her head. Because I was a coward, Noelia. I was afraid of tearing the family apart. I used to think your parents must have had a good reason. But after this past Thanksgiving, after what they did to you, I couldn't stay silent. You deserve to know. I took a deep breath. My chest felt tight. $400,000, I whispered. I never even knew that money existed. Meanwhile, I took out over $100,000 in student loans and spent my whole youth trying to survive. I know, Aunt Kara said softly. And I'm sorry. I can't change what's already happened. But you get to decide what happens next. I stared at the stack of documents. Everything had official stamps, dates, specific transfers. It wasn't just the truth, it was evidence. Numbers don't lie. I'm an accountant, I murmured. I've uncovered entire fraud schemes inside our company. And I never once suspected my own family could be the silent thieves. Aunt Kara took my hand. Your grandfather used to say, little Noelia might not be the flashiest, but she's the wisest and the strongest. I think he was right. I gripped her hand tightly, for the first time in my life feeling like someone was on my side without wanting anything in return. The cold wind still howled outside, but inside I began to feel something else. A quiet fire building in my chest. Not rage but resolve. A decision not to tolerate one more injustice. I brought the envelope home and laid it neatly on my desk, next to the laptop I'd used for the past 7 years. That night I didn't sleep. My desk lamp cast a soft glow over each page as I quietly read through them again, as if I were auditing my own stolen youth. I'm a senior financial analyst at a major auditing firm. I've helped expose illegal international transfers and hidden assets. I know every trick in the book for masking funds, manipulating documents. But I never imagined I'd use those skills to investigate my own parents. I started with the paper I'd signed when I was 18. Back then, my mother told me it was a medical authorization form, in case of emergencies. I remember it clearly. It was graduation week. I was scrambling with college applications, saying goodbye to friends. I signed without reading, thinking she was just being cautious. That document, now I know, had nothing to do with medical care. It was a full financial power of attorney, allowing my parents to manage my trust fund. And they used it. More than once. I created a new spreadsheet, inputting every withdrawal from the statements Aunt Kara gave me. Then I opened the same tracing software we use internally at work. I entered each amount, recipient name, and destination account. The first transaction made me freeze. $38,500 withdrawn from the trust, wired to a company called Green Table Group LLC. I checked an old file, an announcement congratulating Zachary on opening his first restaurant in 2011 with the tagline, "Part of the Green Table family, modern cuisine with a home-style touch." I searched the company ID. Legal owner, Zachary Green. Registered owner. Next was $72,000, wired to the tuition account of a private school in Florence, Italy, right when Brooke left to study international culinary arts. Then smaller amounts followed. 6,200, 9,800, 4,100, all funneled into the same personal account at a Florida bank. I opened a 2017 bank statement I had saved, the same year my mom called asking for a couple thousand to fix the roof. I'd wired her $2,500. But now I saw she had already withdrawn over $25,000 from the trust just months earlier to buy shares in a resort complex in Sarasota, a detail she never once mentioned. I sat motionless. Every detail I'd once dismissed now pieced together into a complete picture. They hadn't just borrowed. They had planned it. They had exploited my ignorance, my blind trust. I searched my old emails. In the search bar I typed authorization, and up popped a message from my father sent on the day I reached legal adulthood. "Sweetie, sign this for me, it's just some bank paperwork for Grandpa's account to keep things safe. No need to read closely, it's just routine." I read it again, each word cutting like a small blade across old memories. They didn't lie sloppily. They lied gently, consistently, and for so many years that I believed it was normal. I dug up my old student loan agreements. A wave of bitterness surged through me. I had been so frugal I didn't dare order pizza on a Friday night. I once worked double shifts, first at the library then the coffee shop. Meanwhile, the money my grandfather left for me had been drained into anonymous investment funds, international vacations, and a restaurant dream led by a man who never passed a basic finance course. I remembered last year's dinner. My mother said, "Zach is so talented, he opened 3 restaurants in 4 years." When I smiled and gently mentioned that profit margins in food service were unpredictable, she snapped, "You always ruin the mood." I didn't ruin the mood. I just couldn't pretend. Now I know, I wasn't just erased from their dinner table, their family photos. I was erased from the rights to something that was meant to help me build my future. And they did it with a calmness that chills me to the bone. I looked at the numbers one last time, then saved everything into a secure file. After nearly 20 years of sitting quietly on the sidelines, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Because the truth was no longer hearsay, it was in my hands now. Proof, numbers, signatures, and a silence that had finally been broken. Janelle Carter's law office was on the 6th floor of a glass building downtown. Not overly luxurious, but polished enough that anyone walking in instinctively sat up straighter. I arrived 20 minutes early, carrying a black leather bag with 3 envelopes inside. Everything I'd gathered: bank statements, power of attorney documents, unauthorized transfers, and a legal summary Janelle had prepared for each of my family members. I sat facing the large glass window, gripping the glass of water Janelle had handed me, my eyes following the wind rustling through the trees below. I had pictured this scene dozens of times. I'd sit upright, speak each word clearly, no trembling, no compromise. But no matter how much I prepared, the moment still brought a strange tightness to my chest. Not anger. Not fear. Just the exhaustion of someone who's walked too long in the dark. The door opened. My mother entered first, neat in a light gray sweater. My father followed, expression blank. Then Brooke, her blonde hair tied back, eyes glued to her phone. Zachary came last, wearing a leather jacket, hands in pockets, gaze defiant. "Well," my mother said, placing her purse on the chair, "it's been a while since I've seen you in such a proper place." I said nothing. Janelle stood, shook hands with each of them, and invited them to sit around the walnut conference table in the center of the room. I placed one envelope in front of each person. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I didn't invite you here for a family reunion. I invited you to address something serious." All eyes turned to me. I continued. "In front of each of you is a full copy of the financial transactions related to the trust my grandfather left behind. These include evidence that the funds were withdrawn and used improperly, not once but over several years." Zachary scoffed and didn't even open the envelope. "What's wrong with you? You're acting like this is a criminal case." Janelle cut in, voice icy. "We haven't said it is, yet. But if you reject the settlement offer outlined in the letter, we will submit the documents to the IRS and the Department of Justice." My mother raised her brows and reluctantly opened the envelope. My father remained stone-faced, but I saw his hands clench slightly. Brooke flipped through a few pages, then smirked. "You really want to destroy everything over a few numbers?" she asked, her eyes dripping with contempt. I looked up. I just want what's mine. Not a cent more. I'm your sister. Brooke snapped. Mom only wanted me to have a chance to study abroad. Zach was chasing his dream. With my money, I replied, calm but clear. Your chances were built from assets I never knew existed, while I worked 2 jobs to pay off student loans. My father finally spoke, his first words since entering. No one stopped you from going to school. That was your choice. No one stopped me, true, I said. But no one told me the truth either. And while I struggled to survive, you all used my money to live as if I didn't exist. Janelle laid out a document on the table. This is the proposed settlement. If you acknowledge wrongdoing and agree to full repayment, we won't pursue legal action. If not, my client will proceed with both criminal and civil suits. Zachary slammed his hand on the table. You're insane. You're really going to drag the whole family to court over this? I didn't look away from him. Family? My family ended the day they left me alone at every holiday table. The day they used my name to build their lives and turned their backs when I needed help. My mother stood, her hands slightly trembling. Do you not care about this family's reputation? What do you think people will say about me if this gets out? I've cared too much for too long, Mom, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Now I care about myself. Janelle added firmly, you have 7 days to sign the agreement. If not, we'll follow through with the legal process. Zachary shot up from his seat, yanking his coat. You'll regret this. Brooke followed him silently, only casting one last resentful look at me. My parents quietly gathered the papers, not saying a single word to me. Only the sound of their heels echoed down the marble hallway as they left, leaving me and Janelle in silence. I stayed seated, posture still upright, but my hands had turned cold. Janelle gently touched my shoulder. You did the right thing. Now it's their turn to face the consequences. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just looked at the door that had just closed, feeling strangely empty. Not because I mourned anything, but because every last illusion had finally fallen away. 3 days after the meeting at Janelle's office, I received the first email from the family's legal team, sent by Hollis and Grant, a name well known in elite asset protection circles. It was an 8-page document, clinical and cold, stating that their clients denied all accusations and would pursue legal action against me if I continued to spread false information damaging to the family's reputation. I printed every page, laid them out neatly on my kitchen counter. The paper was thin, but the weight it carried was betrayal, one I had expected. What I didn't expect was how far they'd take it. The next day I saw a Facebook post from my mother. A photo of her smiling at a church fundraising event, captioned, "In hard times, family is where healing begins, even when some get lost along the way." Beneath it, dozens of comments offering sympathy. You're so strong, hope things get better. Some people should be grateful instead of hurting their own mother. Brooke posted a black and white image with bold white text. No one talks about the ones who lie to destroy their own family from within. One of her friends commented, anyone with a sister that unstable must have had a tough childhood. Brooke liked the comment. I didn't respond. I didn't share. I just screenshotted every single line, saved them in a file and forwarded them to Janelle. We had anticipated a response, but not this path of personal attacks instead of settlement. Then came the anonymous messages. Some just said, ungrateful, you don't deserve to be their daughter. Others were longer, linking to an article from a local tabloid. Headline, Cracks in a Prestigious Family, Eldest Daughter's Breakdown Leads to Accusations. The article quoted an anonymous source close to the Green family, describing me as distant, emotionally unstable since college, obsessed with financial control, and recently exhibiting erratic behavior without clear cause. I read every line, unblinking. The article didn't name me directly, but it was obvious to anyone who knew me who it was about. I saw my company mentioned vaguely, suggesting I'd had ethical conflicts with management. I laughed bitterly. I was the one who exposed and reported the internal financial fraud, earned a confidential bonus, but never received public credit. Apparently, my family found a way to distort even that. I forwarded the article to my company's legal department, then quietly shut down all my social media. Not out of weakness, but because I needed focus. That evening my mother called. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. How much is enough, Noelia? Do you want to see your mother humiliated in public? Zach losing his customers? Do you even realize you're killing this family bit by bit? I replayed that voicemail. Her voice shook, but not once did she say sorry. Just fear for their reputation. Fear for the family that never truly included me. Janelle texted early the next morning. They're trying to intimidate you. If you want, we can strike back. But the choice is yours. I sat by the kitchen window watching the light snow fall across the rooftops. I had been called unstable my whole childhood, just because I didn't laugh when people made jokes at my expense, just because I chose silence when I was disrespected. Now I had the truth, the proof, the law, and still they tried to use ridicule to make me back down. I opened a note from my first meeting with Janelle. The top page read, "The goal isn't revenge. The goal is to reclaim what's right." I underlined that line in red ink. My family had chosen war. But this time I wasn't coming in begging for a seat at the table. I came with power, preparation, and above all, clarity. What struck me most wasn't the accusations. It was how easily they turned me into a stranger, just to protect the perfect image they'd built their whole lives. I sent the full financial file to the Federal Tax Investigation Office on a Monday morning, as wind swept through the cold streets of Minneapolis. Everything was carefully prepared. Notarized copies of transactions, the power of attorney I was tricked into signing at 18, a handwritten letter from Aunt Kara affirming my grandfather's original intent, and a 17-page sworn statement. I didn't send it hoping someone would come to my rescue. I sent it because I believed that justice, even when delayed, still has a voice. A week later, I got a confirmation email saying the file had been forwarded to the Special Financial Crimes Division at the Department of the Treasury. It added, "Confidentiality request approved. Any interference will be monitored." Concise. Clear. Emotionless, but exactly what I needed. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Janelle. No need to sound alarms. I'd learned that the ones who do the deepest harm are often the best at hiding it. 3 days later, Zachary posted a short video on his social media account, standing in front of his flagship restaurant in St. Paul, his voice slightly anxious but trying to stay composed. "We're temporarily closing for an internal audit. Everything will be back to normal soon." I read through hundreds of comments. No more praise like before. People started asking questions. A few former customers wrote, "Made a reservation but no one answers the phone." Someone else asked, "Is this about the lawsuit? Heard he used his sister's trust fund to start the business." I quietly took screenshots of everything. A message came from Janelle the next morning. "It's starting." The investigation office issued a freeze on Zach's personal accounts and company records for 90 days. They've also contacted the bank where your mother keeps her savings account in Florida. I typed back simply, "Good. I've waited a long time for this." That afternoon I got a call from Mrs. Jensen, my grandfather's former banker who once helped Aunt Kara trace the first withdrawals. Her voice was gravelly, slow but steady. They called me in for a preliminary witness interview. They want confirmation on John's intent and the 2005 forms. I'll tell them everything. Don't worry. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I know this isn't easy for you. It's easier than living another day knowing I stood by while a young woman got robbed blind, she said, and hung up before I could reply. The news started to spread. No more vague hints. Now full headlines on local outlets. Assets of Green Table Group frozen amid alleged inheritance fraud. Another article. Eldest daughter accuses family of misusing grandfather's trust fund. Financial dispute or organized deceit? My name wasn't mentioned outright. But anyone who knew me could read between the lines. And the ones who once stayed silent began to feel uneasy. Messages trickled in from distant relatives, some who had liked those earlier mocking posts. One read, "If you need to talk, I'm here." Another said, "At first I thought you were being rigid. But now I see, staying quiet is complicity." I didn't respond. Not out of anger. But because I no longer needed their validation. Brooke shut down her social media account just 2 days after a former college friend posted publicly that Brooke once bragged about having a family sponsor for her study abroad scholarship, without ever mentioning it came from someone else's trust. Zachary canceled all marketing campaigns for the restaurant. I heard he called a few close investors, asking them to hold off until things blew over. No one replied. My mother was quieter than I imagined. No more moralizing posts, no more church council photos. Word was she tried asking an old friend to help move money out of state, but the bank denied it, citing account scrutiny. She had always thought herself clever and cautious. But now, the very system she'd once called her safe net was the first to lock down everything she held. I still showed up at the office every day. Still clocked in on time. Still met every deadline. No one at work asked about anything. But I could tell they knew. The way they looked at me had shifted, not with pity but with a quiet kind of respect. A recognition I had never received from my own blood. One Wednesday afternoon as I stepped off the elevator, I saw Janelle waiting in the lobby. She handed me a slim folder. The IRS just sent a preliminary notice. They may move forward with prosecution if the final documents match your evidence. I took it silently. You can stop here, Janelle said, eyes steady. No one's forcing you to go on. You've done more than enough to defend the truth. I nodded. But inside I already knew I wasn't stopping. Not when the truth had already broken past silence. Not when trust had been traded for years of loss. And especially not when I was finally standing where, for the first time, I had a choice in justice. The verdict was handed down in a closed courtroom at the end of June. No media. No noise. Just the judge, Department of Justice reps, both legal teams, and a few court staff. I sat at the back behind Janelle. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My silence by then carried more weight than any accusation. My mother received 3 years of probation for misuse of trust funds and legal fraud for falsifying a power of attorney. She wasn't jailed, but she had to complete over 120 hours of community service and was banned from handling any inherited assets going forward. My father, the man who always chose silence over speaking up, was fined and ordered to repay part of the funds he had misused. He didn't object. He didn't even look at me. Zachary, who fought the hardest, eventually had to sell off the entire restaurant chain to repay what he'd taken from the trust. I heard he moved into a low-budget motel up north, shut down all his social media accounts, and lost nearly all his business reputation. Brooke was the only one trying to pretend none of this touched her. But a few weeks after the case closed, I got an internal email from H. Someone named Brooke Green had applied for a junior accounting role. I didn't respond. A few days later, I saw her in the reception area. Our eyes met for just a second, long enough for her to look away before I got close. No hello. No apology. Just the quiet retreat of someone who once believed everything could be hidden behind a perfect smile. Then came the letters. First from my mother. A thick envelope, handwritten, neat cursive like when I was little. She wrote about sleepless nights, about the shame and hurt I had caused the family, and ended with, "If you still have any heart, stop this now so we can begin to heal." I didn't reply. A few days later, my father's letter arrived. Order. No admittance of guilt. No apology. Just this: family is the only thing that lasts, Noelia. One day you'll be alone and come back. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Zachary didn't write. But I received an email from a representative attorney titled, "Proposal for Non-Litigious Resolution." The message was brief. If I agreed not to pursue a civil lawsuit for damages, the family would issue a public apology and agree to repay the remaining sum within 6 months. The final clause stated clearly, "This apology does not constitute an admission of guilt." I laughed out loud. A dry, tired laugh. They still didn't understand. They still thought I did all of this for the money, for the victory. They still couldn't see the one thing I truly needed: a sincere acknowledgement that they were wrong, that I had been betrayed not just financially, but at the very core of my trust. I didn't respond for 3 days. Then on Wednesday afternoon I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop and typed 4 short paragraphs. "I've read everything you sent. The long-winded letters, the half-hearted terms, the apologies, with strings attached. But none of you truly understand what was lost. I no longer care about compensation, reputation, or your silence. I've lived too long with unspoken conditions and polite lies. I don't want any apology that comes with a requirement to stay quiet. I don't want a resolution, if it means erasing what I lived through just to protect your image. I am no longer anyone's daughter." I hit send. No subject line. No signature. Minutes later my phone buzzed. A call from my mother, then my father, then Brooke. I let them all go to voicemail. Those voices no longer weighed down my heart. They were just the final noise of a door that had long since closed. And this time I was the one who locked it. Autumn in Boulder had a peace all its own. The leaves shifted from green to deep gold, carpeting the sidewalks like a quiet dream I'd long wished for. I moved here after everything ended, not to run away, but to start again fully. I rented a small 2-story house on the south side of the city, where you could hear birds through the kitchen window in the morning, and the streetlights at night felt soft enough to make you reach for tea instead of a laptop. I spent over 3 months redesigning the first floor into a private financial counseling office. On a small wooden sign out front, I placed a plaque that read, "Toward Freedom: Financial Guidance for Women Rebuilding Their Lives." Each woman who stepped into that space brought her own story. One had a husband who tracked every cent she spent on their shared credit card. Another had a brother who manipulated her inheritance. And another had signed documents she didn't understand simply because she trusted her family. I didn't just help them read bank statements or build savings plans. I helped them name what society often ignores. Financial harm is a form of abuse. And the right to know what you own, and choose what to keep, is a part of human dignity. Aunt Kara still visited now and then. She'd bring homemade apple jam or old magazines she thought I'd enjoy. One October afternoon, while I was rearranging the bookshelf, she handed me an old, yellowing novel. "Your grandfather hid this in here," she said, placing the book on the table. I found it cleaning out the old cabinet. I opened it and a folded paper slipped from the pages. The paper had aged, but the handwriting was still clear. My grandfather's, slanted and steady. "If you're reading this, it means you've found the truth. Don't be afraid, because you're the strongest one." I rested my hand on that line for a long time. Not out of sadness, but because I felt seen, even by someone who had left this world nearly 20 years ago. For so long I had waited for someone to say it. Now I didn't need anyone's validation, and still reading his words warmed a part of me I didn't know was cold. That Thanksgiving I hosted the holiday dinner in my little house. No extravagant spreads, no 3-course plating. I baked a pumpkin pie, made a pot of corn chowder, and tossed a salad with walnuts and dried cranberries. The people at that table weren't blood family, but people I chose. A former coworker who quietly protected me during rough times at work. A single mother I helped restart her life after divorce. A senior year intern working in my office. Aunt Kara came too, bringing a bottle of red wine and a hand-stitched napkin with my name sewn in crimson thread. We sat around the old wooden table, candles flickering gently in the glass. No one had to play a role. No one had to prove anything. I set an extra chair at the end of the table near the window. No one asked why. But I knew that seat was for an old version of me, the one who used to sit at the edge of family dinners, smiling faintly, quietly waiting for a pat on the shoulder or a kind question. I left that chair there to say, she doesn't have to wait anymore. She's home now and this house is hers. As the meal began, I stood up, lifted my glass and said with a steady voice, "Thank you for being here today. I think all of us have faced some form of hurt in our lives. But today we're not gathered because of what happened in the past. We're here because we didn't let it decide who we are." There was no applause. Just the soft silence of something tender settling in. And then the quiet smiles of those who understood that sitting together like this was already a gift. One not everyone is born with. But one anyone can create, if they're brave enough to walk through darkness and name their own worth. I know my story might feel heavy. But if you're still listening, maybe a part of you has carried a wound like mine. Whether from a relative, a broken promise, or just the feeling of being pushed out of a place you were supposed to belong. I didn't share this story to blame or complain. I shared it to remind you that sometimes what we need most isn't forgiveness from others, but a quiet recognition of our own value. No one has the right to take away your voice or what belongs to you, not even those who call themselves family. If you've ever been dismissed, called too sensitive, too stubborn, or too different, remember those very things might also be your strength. And you have the right to retell your life in your own voice. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. What do you think is the hardest part when someone chooses to stand up and speak the truth? And if you've been through something similar, share it. Not just to release it, but to show others they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel because soon I'll be sharing more true stories about family, silent wounds, and the journey to reclaim yourself. Stories that sometimes just need one person to tell to change how we see everything. Thank you for staying with me all the way through.